My cheating girlfriend slept with another man, so I ended it and let her reap what she sowed. I don't lose sleep over what happened. I lose sleep over not knowing when it started. My name is Kevin. I'm 28 years old, and I work as an IT technician for a tech company downtown. For nearly a decade, I thought I had found my soulmate in Laura, the girl who'd been by my side since we were both 18, fresh out of high school and ready to take on the world together. Laura and I met during our senior year of high school, in that magical time when everything feels possible and forever seems achievable. She was this vibrant, intelligent girl with striking green eyes and an infectious laugh that could light up any room. What drew me to her wasn't just her beauty, though she was absolutely stunning, but the way she made me feel like I was the most important person in her world. Our relationship developed quickly and intensely, the way young love often does. We spent every possible moment together, talking for hours about our dreams, our fears, and our plans for the future. She had this way of making even the most mundane activities feel special, watching movies on my couch, walking through the park, or just sitting in comfortable silence together. When we graduated, most of our friends were heading off to different colleges or starting their adult lives in separate directions. But Laura and I were determined to stay together. We found a small apartment across town and moved in together just a few months after graduation. It felt like the most natural thing in the world, like we were meant to be partners in everything. The early years of living together were everything I'd hoped they would be. We were broke college kids trying to figure out adulthood, but we had each other. I worked part-time while studying computer science, and Laura juggled her own classes and work schedule. We'd come home exhausted but excited to share our days with each other. But our happiness was tested when Laura's relationship with her mother reached a breaking point. Her mom had always been controlling and critical, but as Laura became more independent, their conflicts intensified. The fights became more frequent and more vicious, usually centered around her mother's disapproval of our relationship, and her demands that Laura move back home and stop playing house with me. The final blow came during Laura's sophomore year of college, when her mother discovered that we were living together and completely lost her mind. She showed up at our apartment screaming about morality and reputation, demanding that Laura choose between our relationship and her family. When Laura refused to break up with me, her mother literally threw her belongings onto the sidewalk and told her she was no longer welcome in their house. I'll never forget the look on Laura's face that day. A mixture of hurt, anger, and complete devastation. She'd lost not just her mother's support, but her entire family, since her younger siblings were forbidden from contacting her. It was heartbreaking to watch someone I loved so much be rejected by the people who were supposed to care for her unconditionally. My family stepped in immediately. My parents, who had always liked Laura, welcomed her into our home without hesitation. My mom sat her down that first night and told her, "You're part of our family now, and family takes care of each other." My dad, usually a man of few words, simply gave her a hug and said, "You're our daughter too for the next few years." Laura truly became part of our family. She spent holidays with us, joined our family traditions, and even called my parents mom and dad. They treated her exactly like they treated me, with unconditional love, support, and the occasional lecture about responsibility. She flourished in that environment, seeming to heal from the trauma of her mother's rejection. We both finished college and started our careers, Laura in marketing and me in IT. We talked constantly about our future together, marriage, buying a house, having children. Everyone who knew us assumed we were already engaged, and honestly, I was just waiting for the right moment to propose. Laura seemed just as excited about our future as I was, often bringing up wedding ideas or talking about what kind of mother she wanted to be someday. Our relationship felt solid and mature, built on years of shared experiences and mutual support. We'd been through financial stress, family drama, career changes, and all the normal challenges that couples face, and we'd handled everything together. I trusted her completely and believed she felt the same way about me. That trust was shattered during Laura's 5th year out of college, when she received an opportunity that would change everything between us. Her marketing firm offered her a position at their branch office in another state, a significant promotion that would advance her career but require her to relocate for 8 months to establish the new market. The decision was difficult for both of us. The promotion was exactly what Laura had been working toward, and the salary increase would help us save for our future together. But 8 months apart felt like an eternity, especially when we'd barely spent a week away from each other in the previous 6 years. After many long conversations, we decided she should take the opportunity. We were committed to making our long-distance relationship work, and 8 months seemed manageable if it meant setting ourselves up for a better future together. We planned visits every few weeks, daily video calls, and constant communication to maintain our connection. The first few weeks went exactly as planned. Laura was excited about her new role and the challenges it presented. She'd call me every evening to share details about her day, her new coworkers, and the city she was temporarily calling home. I missed her terribly, but I was proud of her success and counting down the days until she'd return home. But as the weeks turned into months, I began to notice subtle changes in our communication patterns. Laura's calls became less frequent and shorter in duration. When we did talk, she seemed distracted and less engaged in our conversations. She'd mention new friends and social activities, but her descriptions were vague and sometimes contradictory. The physical distance made it difficult to gauge what was really happening. When I'd express concern about feeling disconnected, Laura would reassure me that she was just busy with work and adjusting to her new environment. She'd promised to be more attentive and make more effort to maintain our connection, but the improvements were always temporary. About 4 months into her time away, I noticed that our video calls had almost completely stopped. Laura claimed her internet connection was unreliable, and she preferred phone calls, but something about the excuse felt off. When we did manage to video chat, she seemed different, more guarded, less affectionate, like she was performing rather than being genuine. The sexual tension and intimacy that had always been natural between us began to fade during our phone conversations. Laura seemed less interested in romantic talk or making plans for when we'd see each other again. When I'd bring up missing her physically, she'd change the subject or claim she was too tired to engage in that kind of conversation. By the 6th month of her absence, I was seriously worried about our relationship. Laura felt like a stranger when we talked, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was being hidden from me. But every time I tried to address my concerns directly, she'd become defensive and accuse me of being paranoid or controlling. The breaking point came during what should have been a joyful reunion. Laura came home for a long weekend visit, and I was excited to reconnect physically and emotionally after months of distance. But the woman who stepped off the plane wasn't the same person who'd left 8 months earlier. She was polite but distant, affectionate but in a way that felt forced. The easy intimacy we'd always shared was gone, replaced by an awkwardness that neither of us seemed able to overcome. When we tried to be physical, it felt mechanical and disconnected, like she was going through the motions rather than genuinely wanting to be close to me. But what really alarmed me was her behavior with her phone. Laura had always been casual about her devices. We knew each other's passwords, answered each other's phones, and had no secrets about our digital lives. But during that weekend visit, she was protective and secretive about her communications in a way that felt completely out of character. When I asked about her changed behavior, she claimed that living independently had made her more aware of personal boundaries and privacy. She suggested that my discomfort was evidence of my own insecurity, rather than any problem with her actions. The conversation ended in an argument that left both of us frustrated and more distant than before. Laura returned to her temporary assignment with promises to work on our communication and connection. But the remaining 2 months of her time away were even more difficult than the previous 6. Our conversations became perfunctory. Her visits home were canceled due to work obligations, and I began to feel like I was in a relationship with a stranger. When Laura finally returned home permanently, I hoped that physical proximity would help us rebuild what we'd lost during our time apart. But the distance and secrecy continued even when we were living in the same apartment again. She was often on her phone, texting or calling people I didn't know, claiming they were work contacts or friends she'd made during her time away. The discovery that changed everything came 3 weeks after her return, completely by accident. Laura had left her laptop open on our kitchen table while she was in the shower, and a message notification popped up on the screen. I glanced over casually and saw a text that made my blood run cold. "I miss you too, baby. Can't wait until we can be together again." The message was from someone named Liam, a name I'd never heard Laura mention despite months of conversations about her new life. My hands were shaking as I clicked on the message thread and began reading through their conversation history. What I discovered destroyed every assumption I'd made about Laura's time away and our relationship. The messages went back 7 months, starting just 1 month into her assignment. What had begun as casual workplace flirtation had quickly evolved into an intense romantic and sexual relationship. Reading through their exchanges was like discovering that my girlfriend had been living a completely different life for most of her time away. She was passionate, romantic, and emotionally invested in Liam while maintaining the facade of our committed relationship with me. The woman I'd been missing and worrying about had been building an intimate connection with another man. But what devastated me most wasn't just the affair itself. It was the systematic deception involved. Laura had been sharing intimate details about our relationship problems, our sex life, and her plans for our future with someone who was essentially a stranger to me. She'd complained about feeling trapped in our relationship and expressed doubts about whether we were right for each other. The timeline revealed that their relationship had become physical within weeks of starting. They'd been spending nights together, going on dates, and essentially living as a couple while I sat at home planning our future and counting down the days until her return. Most painful was reading Laura's description of our life together. According to her messages, our relationship had become boring and predictable. She described feeling more excitement and passion with Liam in a few months than she'd felt with me in years. She talked about our plans for marriage and children like they were obligations rather than dreams. The discovery hit me like a physical blow. I'd spent 8 months supporting someone who was building a life with another man, missing someone who was getting her emotional and physical needs met elsewhere. The loneliness and confusion I'd been feeling suddenly made perfect sense. I'd been in a relationship with someone who was no longer emotionally available. When Laura came out of the shower, I was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop still open to the message thread with Liam. She saw what I was looking at and immediately went pale. "Kevin, I can explain," she started, but I held up my hand to stop her. "How long?" I asked simply. She sat down across from me, tears already forming in her eyes. "It started about a month after I got there. It wasn't supposed to happen. It just did." The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult of my life. Laura admitted to the physical affair with Liam but tried to minimize its emotional significance. She claimed it had been a mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment that had gotten out of hand. She said she'd ended things with him before returning home and wanted to focus entirely on rebuilding our relationship. But I'd read their messages. I knew that the relationship had been intense and ongoing, that she'd developed genuine feelings for Liam, and that their separation had been difficult for both of them. This wasn't a momentary mistake. It was a conscious choice to maintain 2 relationships simultaneously. "Why didn't you just break up with me?" I asked. "If you were so unhappy with our relationship, why not end it honestly instead of cheating?" She didn't have a good answer for that question. She talked about being confused about her feelings, about not wanting to hurt me, about hoping the distance would help her figure out what she really wanted. But her explanations felt like rationalizations rather than genuine remorse. Despite the overwhelming evidence of her betrayal, I found myself wanting to save our relationship. We'd been together for almost 9 years, built a life together, and had the support of both our families. The thought of ending everything because of what she characterized as a temporary mistake felt impossibly difficult. Laura was eager to rebuild our relationship and put the affair behind us. She agreed to complete transparency about her communications, promised to end all contact with Liam, and suggested couples counseling to help us work through the trust issues. For a moment, it seemed like we might be able to overcome this crisis and emerge stronger. But my faith in her promises was shattered just 2 weeks later when I discovered that she hadn't ended her digital relationship with other men. She'd just become more secretive about it. While going through our shared computer, I found evidence that she'd been sending explicit photos and videos to multiple men she'd met online, including some she'd connected with during her time away. This discovery was somehow even more devastating than learning about the physical affair with Liam. At least that relationship had involved real emotion and connection. But these digital interactions were purely sexual, seemingly motivated by a desire for validation and excitement, rather than genuine feeling. The photos and videos she was sending were intimate and explicit, the kind of content that should have been private between us. Instead, she was sharing her body with strangers on the internet while living in our shared apartment and sleeping in our bed. The violation felt complete and irreversible. When I confronted her about this new discovery, Laura's response was different from her reaction to being caught with Liam. Instead of remorse or apologies, she became defensive and angry. She accused me of violating her privacy and suggested that her online activities were harmless because they didn't involve physical contact. "It's just photos," she said, as if the intimacy and betrayal involved were meaningless. "I'm not sleeping with these people. I'm not emotionally involved with them. It's just fun." But it wasn't just fun to me. It was another layer of deception and betrayal. Evidence that the affair with Liam hadn't been an isolated mistake, but part of a pattern of seeking validation and excitement outside our relationship. She was using her body and sexuality as currency for attention from other men, while expecting me to provide emotional and financial stability. The next few weeks were a blur of arguments, tears, and broken promises. Laura would swear she'd stop her online activities, delete her accounts, and focus entirely on our relationship. But within days, I'd find evidence that she'd simply created new accounts or found different platforms for the same behaviors. I began to realize that I was dealing with someone who was either unable or unwilling to be honest with me about her needs and desires. Instead of having difficult conversations about our relationship problems, she'd chosen to seek solutions elsewhere while maintaining the comfortable aspects of our partnership. My family, who had embraced Laura as their own daughter for years, were devastated when I finally told them what was happening. My mother cried when I explained the situation, mourning not just the end of our relationship, but the loss of someone she'd genuinely come to love. My father, always practical, was more direct in his advice. "Son," he said during a late-night conversation in our garage, "some people aren't capable of the kind of commitment you want to give. That doesn't make them bad people, but it does make them wrong for you. You deserve someone who chooses you every day, not someone who keeps looking for something better." His words hit me hard because they articulated something I'd been struggling to accept. Laura wasn't necessarily a bad person, but she was someone who needed constant validation and excitement in ways that made monogamous commitment difficult for her. She wanted the security and stability of our relationship, while also maintaining the freedom to explore connections with other people. The final straw came when I discovered that Laura had resumed contact with Liam, despite promising to end all communication with him. She'd been using a different messaging app to maintain their relationship while pretending to focus on rebuilding trust with me. When I found their recent conversations, it was clear that she'd been telling him about our relationship problems and expressing regret about ending their affair. Reading Liam's responses was almost as painful as discovering the original betrayal. He was encouraging her to leave me if she was unhappy, offering to help her relocate to his city, and expressing confusion about why she was staying in a relationship that she'd described as unfulfilling. The realization that my girlfriend was discussing our private relationship problems with the man she'd cheated on me with felt like the ultimate violation of trust. She'd turned our most intimate struggles into entertainment for someone who had actively participated in betraying me. That night, I made a decision that would change the course of my life. I couldn't continue in a relationship with someone who was incapable of honesty and commitment. The constant cycle of discovery, promises, and renewed betrayal was destroying my mental health and self-respect. I waited until Laura came home from work the next evening and asked her to sit down for a serious conversation. I explained that I'd discovered her continued contact with Liam and her ongoing online activities despite her promises to stop. "I can't do this anymore," I told her as calmly as I could manage. "I can't keep rebuilding trust with someone who destroys it faster than I can repair it. I love you, but I love myself too much to stay in this situation." Laura's reaction was immediate and intense. She begged me to reconsider, promised that this time would be different, claimed that she'd learned from her mistakes and was ready to commit fully to our relationship. She cried, pleaded, and made grand gestures about changing her behavior permanently. But I'd heard these promises before, and I'd seen how quickly they were broken when maintaining them became inconvenient. The pattern was clear. Laura would engage in deceptive behavior until she was caught, make emotional promises to change, maintain good behavior until the immediate crisis passed, then gradually return to the same patterns. "I believe that you want to change," I told her. "But wanting to change and being able to change are different things. You've shown me who you are when you think you can get away with it. I can't spend the rest of my life wondering what you're hiding from me." The process of ending our 9-year relationship was more difficult than I'd anticipated. We had to untangle shared finances, decide who would keep our apartment, and figure out how to divide belongings that represented nearly a decade of shared memories. Every item we discussed felt heavy with the weight of what we'd lost. The hardest part was telling my family. My parents were heartbroken, not just for me but for Laura, who had been like a daughter to them for years. They'd watched her grow from a hurt teenager who'd been rejected by her own family into a confident young woman, and they'd believed she was going to be part of our family forever. My mother struggled particularly with the news. "I know what she did was wrong," she said through tears, "but I can't just stop loving her. She's been my daughter for years. Where will she go? Who will take care of her?" That conversation helped me understand the full scope of what Laura had thrown away. She hadn't just betrayed me, she'd betrayed an entire family that had embraced her unconditionally. She'd taken the love and support we'd offered, and used it as a safety net while she explored other options. Laura moved out 2 weeks after our breakup conversation. She found a small apartment across town and began the process of rebuilding her life independently. She reached out to me several times in the following months, asking for another chance, and claiming that losing our relationship had made her realize what she'd truly valued. But by then, I'd begun to understand that her regret was probably more about losing the security and family support she'd enjoyed with me than about genuine remorse for her actions. She'd had multiple opportunities to be honest about her needs and desires, multiple chances to work on our relationship problems together, and multiple moments when she could have chosen our partnership over her individual pursuits. The months following our breakup were difficult, but ultimately liberating. I had to rediscover who I was as an individual rather than as half of a couple. After 9 years of making decisions jointly and planning for a shared future, being single felt strange and unfamiliar. But there was also a peace that came with not having to wonder where someone really was when they claimed to be working late, or whether the person I was building a life with was emotionally invested in someone else. I no longer had to analyze text messages for hidden meanings or worry about what conversations were happening when I wasn't around. I started seeing a therapist to process the trauma of betrayal and to understand the patterns that had kept me in a relationship that wasn't serving my best interests. Through those sessions, I began to recognize that I'd been so focused on being the perfect boyfriend that I'd ignored red flags about Laura's capacity for commitment and honesty. I also learned that my desire to fix our relationship problems had prevented me from setting appropriate boundaries. Instead of demanding honesty and fidelity as non-negotiable requirements, I'd treated them as goals we could work toward together. This approach had enabled Laura's deceptive behavior by removing consequences for her actions. Today, more than a year after our breakup, I'm building a life based on authentic connections and honest communication. I'm cautious about dating after such a profound betrayal, but I'm also optimistic about finding someone who understands the value of loyalty and mutual respect. I've learned that love alone isn't enough to sustain a relationship. Without honesty, trust, and shared commitment to the partnership, even the deepest feelings become meaningless. I loved Laura completely, but she was incapable of returning that love in a way that honored our relationship. The experience taught me to pay attention to actions rather than words, to value consistency over passion, and to recognize the difference between someone going through a difficult period and someone who's fundamentally incompatible with monogamous commitment. Most importantly, I learned that self-respect is more valuable than any relationship. The temporary pain of ending things with Laura was infinitely preferable to the ongoing damage of staying with someone who couldn't or wouldn't prioritize our partnership. My family has slowly healed from the loss of Laura, though my mother still asks about her occasionally. They've come to understand that supporting me meant accepting my decision to end a relationship that wasn't serving my well-being, even though they cared deeply about the person I was leaving. Laura has struggled more with the transition to independence. Without the financial and emotional support she'd enjoyed with my family, she's had to learn to navigate adult life entirely on her own. According to mutual friends, she's dated several people since our breakup, but hasn't found the stability and commitment she'd taken for granted with me. I don't take satisfaction in her difficulties, but I also don't feel responsible for them. She made choices that ended our relationship, and now she's living with the consequences of those choices. The security and family support she lost weren't entitlements. They were gifts that required reciprocal loyalty and honesty. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Laura had been honest about her needs and struggles, instead of seeking solutions through deception. If she'd told me she was feeling unfulfilled or curious about other people, we might have been able to work through those issues together or end our relationship before betrayal made it impossible. But that kind of honesty would have required emotional maturity and self-awareness that Laura apparently didn't possess. Instead of facing difficult conversations about our relationship problems, she chose the easier path of maintaining our partnership while exploring other options secretly. The woman who had been my partner for nearly a decade, who had been embraced by my family as a daughter, who had shared my bed and my dreams for the future, taught me what I don't want in a relationship: deception, compartmentalization, and the inability to choose commitment over excitement. Now I'm discovering what I do want: someone who chooses me consistently, who communicates honestly about their needs and struggles, who understands that real love requires sacrifice and compromise from both partners. The betrayal that nearly destroyed my ability to trust ultimately taught me to value myself enough to demand honesty and respect in my relationships. The woman who broke my heart also broke me free from a relationship that was built on illusion rather than reality. Today, I'm grateful for the painful lessons that Laura's betrayal taught me. I'm stronger, wiser, and more aware of my own worth than I was when I believed that love meant accepting whatever treatment someone chose to give me. The girl who laughed in my arms at 18 became a woman who could lie to my face at 27. People change, and sometimes those changes make continued relationships impossible. Recognizing when someone has become incompatible with your values isn't giving up. It's protecting your integrity. I'm building a new life based on authenticity, self-respect, and the belief that real love is possible with someone who values truth as much as I do. The betrayal that ended one chapter of my life became the foundation for a better one, and for that unexpected gift, I'm ultimately grateful.